Good evening, this is Nerds to Human and welcome to this Battlefield Tactics Guide for Thrace in Rome Total War. We'll assess their army composition and ascertain the ideal tactical approach to gain victory in battle. Thrace are of course in a very central position, and so their potential enemies are quite varied. Thus I have more examples than usual today, with us facing off against Dacia, Scythia and Greece in the early army composition, and a couple more case studies for the mid to late game. If you haven't already seen the campaign strategy guide that accompanies this video, then you can find it above now and in the description below. Here is the Thracian unit roster, which it should be said is just a little bit limited. Nonetheless, I think it's kind of interesting because in some ways its lack of elite units forces you to use certain tactics and to find the most productive, creative and effective ways of using what you've got. And indeed we do have ourselves some solid pikemen, some very nice light infantry, some basic skirmisher units and a little bit of cav as well as a touch of siege equipment. Nothing very spectacular, but we do at least have ourselves a fair spread. Nonetheless, there are some units in here which we do need to take a little look at because they can certainly make the difference when you take them out onto the battlefield. So we'll start off then taking on Dacia, one of your options in the early game and probably the easiest type of army to face. Here we have ourselves then a typical early game Thracian army, and of course, like many armies in this part of the world, we have ourselves a nice bit of phalanx to hold the centre of the line, and indeed that's going to be key for us on many here occasions. Militia hoplites probably don't need too much of an introduction, but we will indeed take a quick look at them. So a quick reminder that of course 8 defense, not terrible, poor morale, always expect these guys to break, but a phalanx is a phalanx and who can argue with that? Now, Thrace and Dacia. Now as I say, Dacia are not the hardest in many ways to face because your pikes can do some magnificent work. They don't have their own, so you can really hold the front line with just these guys. However, Falxmen are of course one of the key units for this army and we want to make sure we are making the most of them. So let's remind ourselves what these guys do. Most importantly, a nice chunky attack here. 13 attack, 5 charge bonus. Now they do have a fair amount of defense, most of it the skill itself, fast moving, good morale, and these guys are experts at jumping out of the trees and out of the bushes. We're going to use those as our flanking force really. We don't have ourselves particularly useful cav. We have some Greek cav later which are awful, and we have some militia cav which will also help us out. But these guys are going to be key. You just need to make sure we can get them into position safely. To do that we of course need to take out any opposition cav. Now the Dacians do have some excellent cav a little bit later on, but at this stage no, they have the basic barbarian cav. So what we can do is get our militia cav out here, and they can hopefully do an excellent job of just making sure that this cavalry aren't going to cause us too many problems. So a little bit of skirmishing will be absolutely fine, but to be honest, the javelins will be very, very effective, and eventually we can slam into them. So these guys need to be taken care of. Once we've done the skirmishing, we can eventually head into the main infantry battle. You should pretty reliably be able to take out their cavalry, and assuming that's happened late, far enough out on the battlefield, normally the AI will still choose to swing on into the centre of your army. Now, with that done, we want to get these guys onto loose formation actually, because loose formation they can hopefully do a lot more lovely work. These guys can stand out here at this point, do a lovely bit of javelin work. You guys need to get us to the flanks, and oh yeah, you guys do as well. We'll just let the Falxmen get themselves into position. They are pouring on into this unit. So yeah, this is where we want to just start using our cav to do a little bit of that mopping work. And we also want war cry and a charge. That should be good. We've already got a break there before that's even happened, which is magnificent news. They are breaking. And that means this unit over here can do what we need them to, which is hopefully to swing on across. War cry and complete. Okay, fine. We're going to swing from the other side. Okay, winning both flanks definitely helps with the trap like that. And at this point, yeah, we'll just get the cavalry to mop them up. That is a brutal victory. Even the militia hoplite over here managed to hold pretty darn nicely. And fortunately it's Falksman over here, they intercepted that flank. But yeah, winning this flank just meant the centre gave up before we even charged in. And that's what we're going to try and do quite often here, is we're going to try and roll up the enemy as they try and regroup. Well, they're not regrouping very well here, but we're trying to roll them up along our front line. And naturally, it's very easy to chase them down with our armies because we have some very light cavalry indeed. These militia cav, which we'll look closely at in a moment when we face Scythia. But yeah, fast moving, much like our general. Not very good in the old defence, but he is a Greek-style general. He's fast moving, and we can mop up as many of them as we possibly can. And the game would see that as a heroic victory, 708 kills to 116. As I say, we just want to hold them on the pikes and then sweep them up with those Falksmen. Oh, that was lovely. You'll see when we face Scythia here that we're going to need a very different composition to our army, and to deal with all the horse archers, we're going to need to bring along as many of these javelin cav as possible. As I mentioned in that previous clip there, the javelin cav are slightly superior to these guys. 6, 6, 6, 2 there, if we can click on them here, 3, 7 to the missile, and 5 on defense. So we are stronger in the melee, but we need to be very careful. They've got the range advantage, and as we know, our general isn't the toughest. So what we're going to try and do here is use the general to keep our morale holding, because as you can see, it's quite likely that a unit might break. What we want to do is try and get their men to break by picking them off. So we're going to grab the other men over here and charge them into that direction, hopefully clear them out as well. Just yeah, trying to group as big as you can and take off chunks of them. Now the infantry are going to get massacred. You'll be unsurprised to know. I kind of brought them along just to make that point, really. You should find that they really struggle. But I am going to get all of these guys just to charge on in, and we should, with our superior melee, be able to eventually wear them down. It's going to cost us, but victory will eventually be ours against the Scythians. Indeed, with enough units split up and distracted, we've got the general routing. Down he goes, and messy as it is, victory is most the way to being ours now. We can group the whole lot together, pick off those two, turn back around, and deal with the others. Of course, any battle in the open field against Scythia is going to be a bit of a nightmare. On this occasion, even our infantry have actually managed to get away fairly unscathed. That won't always be the case, but you will find that if you can battle them in the cities, you're really going to want to focus on doing that. Nonetheless, you can win these battles out in the field eventually. It will take some tedious trapping of all of the enemies, but you can eventually pull it off, and hopefully at the end of this we'll find ourselves with another heroic victory. Of course, the main army you're likely to end up facing as Thrace are the Macedonians, or indeed the Greeks. Both are similar, although the Macedonians definitely have the scarier cav. The Greeks do have some rather heavy lads in the armoured hoplites, and we're going to have to go and find a way to deal with them. Now, at the very least, we can try and match them up, but we are going to have the inferior units. Nonetheless, our extra long pikes, if you can get out some phalanx pikemen, could potentially be a key difference for you. Now, by the time you're in Greece and facing these, hopefully you've got some, because you're going to need them, I would suggest, to give you a slight advantage, at the very least, in terms of your distances. Now, their defense of 13, attack of 8, and 120 soldiers extra men, that is going to be helpful, but the morale is very low. So without the Temple of Ares boosting their morale, you might well find that they melt a lot more easily than you hope. Now, we are still in the earlier period of the army at this stage, I would say, so we're still keeping militia hoplites in here. Well worth considering where they end up being, because it looked like their armoured hoplites are going to come in to these guys. This is most likely going to be our weakest point, so we need to keep an eye on whether we can hold it. But the battle's going to start in a very similar way to Dacia. In fact, the whole of this plan is quite similar, except this time we've got to admit that we are eventually going to lose the infantry conflict. So we need to make sure we decide what we're doing. Don't know what they're doing, but I'd quite like to take out their cav if at all possible. As ever, you'll probably find that the Greek cav are likely to flee, giving you a good opportunity to slam into their rear. Unlike Dacia, they don't have as many fast infantry units. You can really start to now pick off the rear with these guys, which is perfect and is going to help your morale massively. Now, like last time, we want to get ourselves into loose formation with these guys. We want to get them out to those flanks, and we want to get them in a position to do damage very, very soon indeed. Don't get your cav pulled into the general. That's really not what we want to see. They're now getting distracted. If nothing else, actually, putting away the general isn't the worst thing in the world. Now, what we can do is make sure we get our war cry on and charge on into there. Likewise. Oh, this is interesting. I wouldn't actually mind the general being dealt with by them. They'll lose, but I just need long enough to get these guys into position, because ideally the general would have ran into that kind of a direction. You just try and swing out of the way for a few javelins, keep them busy if at all possible. You need to deal with those guys. And here the Falksmen have done their job. They've done their job. We are mopping them up surprisingly quickly. The other Falksmen didn't quite get the angle right, but I think we should be in a very, very good position to push these guys along. Let's follow the Falksmen into battle, and their charge bonus is big, remember. Armoured hoplites over here. Ah yes, that's why they've held a little bit longer on that side. But even those units are gone, and let's complete the charge around with the phalanx. Now, their general has obviously defeated our cav. That's fine. We expected that entirely. But these guys can now go and mop them up. And the general has very, very little left to do. I'm actually pretty impressed we've lasted this long over here. Falx is getting ripped apart at the front. But there we are. Armoured hoplites going down. Time for the general. He's going to do some horrible damage as he hits us, but we're just going to have to take it on this occasion. Hack him down and finish it off. Down goes the general. The Falksman ripped him to shreds, as it turned out. And with that, they are coming in for a second go, but they are now perfectly in position to be absolutely ripped to shreds. So we're not even going to war cry this time. We don't even need to, because these guys are running into long pikes and they're getting fouled. And that really is the essence of this tactic. If you can just hold the line, then you've got yourself the most magnificently powerful light infantry that will get in and rip even armoured hoplites to shreds. Now, whilst you might think these Falksmen are terrible when facing pikes, they are indeed if they hit them in the front, but you can see there the power of using your units to the best of their abilities. Excellent stuff. Welcome to the late game army of the Thracians, and you'd be forgiven for thinking it doesn't look quite similar. It does indeed look very similar. They don't have a huge variety of units, as we well know, but the phalanx pikemen will now take centre stage, or at least the centre of the formation, because these guys can at least hold a half decent line, especially when we remember to train them under Ares. I have not done that here, but with the morale bonus they'll be very, very effective, particularly now with our new flanking lads, which are these guys, the Bastane. They do fill pretty much the same niche as the Falksmen here, but just a slight different angle to it. So, still got the powerful attack and charge bonus, still fairly low on the defences with, yes, the charging without orders potential, but, they now have 2 hit points, and 2 hit points will just make that slight bit of difference. It will keep them alive a little bit longer to make sure that you can get the flanking manoeuvre in. I've actually got them just behind the flank here, and obviously we are going to test out this later game army against the Romans. This time I brought along some basic archers. It would be lovely to have Cretians. If you're playing the game, you'll have plenty of opportunity to grab yourself some Cretians, but for now we don't. The orange is an interesting one because this picture isn't even here normally for Thrace, so yes, I've actually had to go in the files and plop that in. Weirdly, I had never noticed that in about 19 years of Rome Total War, until very recently when someone put it in the comments. So there we are. Here's the picture. In case you missed it, it's nothing special. It's just an onager, but it's nice to have. Now, what we're trying to do for this Roman example is use our men in the forest, because, yeah, what these guys are going to be very good at is leaping out of the forest to go and do some damage. I probably should have put this army just a little bit closer to the forest. I suspect I meant to do that, but forgot. So we could potentially just shift ourselves across very slightly here. So I will do that now. We'll leave the orange where it is. And just shuffle it more like that. That'll be grand. Now, of course, Romans. They are going to be a little bit tougher. We need to take out that cav as ever, and this time they're not mucking around. They are, of course, bringing some legionary cav. At least they're not Praetorians, I suppose, but they're still going to be pretty tough. We have no upgrade to our cav. We've only gained Greek cav, which are awful. Even less useful than militia cav. But militia cav, as I said before, are actually very, very effective. They're just a little bit low morale and a little bit weak. But we can do some good work with them if we are careful. So we're going to try and get as much javelin damage as we can on these guys. And the main plan with the Romans really is just to try and hold them in position, and the same kind of hammer and anvil tactic. But obviously the Romans, they can be a little bit more chunky and a little bit more potentially dangerous. Now it should be noted that the Bastani don't actually have the war cry, so they can't really use that in the same way. We've got to be very careful. So the legionary cav have managed to charge on in, but they've charged into pikes, which is not the worst thing in the world. We hopefully will see them go down. Over at the rear here, we seem to have distracted them, having failed to take out the cav. So at the very least, we can do some mopping up of their flanks, or at least their archers at the rear aren't shooting us down. So we'll run in these falconsmen over here, but of course our strength is going to be those guys over there who should still be invisible, and we're going to start running them in. Falconsmen are charging on into those legionary cohort. Hopefully we'll do a half decent job. Those cav have actually seemed to push off the legionaries, which is excellent news. These guys are not quite doing the flanking I hoped they would, but if nothing else, some work seems to be going on at the very rear. Praetorian cohort is not what our cavalry want to be facing. So these guys are going to walk right and charge. We are going to get more of them to war cry and maybe try and get around, and you to maybe war cry and get around. And we're going to try and continue with the same kind of plan that we normally see here, but we might just find it a little bit trickier to pull it off. So obviously this is the flank where we're trying to achieve this. There we are, we've got one break on them. That is excellent. Light Auxilia can go down. We just need some of this to hold. Fortunately, there's a legionary cohort over here that's about to close in on us. So I'm going to have to do something, distract them with these lads over here. Maybe use the general if it's absolutely necessary. We are struggling. Ooh, general's going to come in at these guys now. There we are. Okay, those falconsmen have been smashed by the general. These guys need to swing along the flanks, and this general is hopefully just seeing that we're okay on that side. As you can see, we are struggling to have the same effect as we were against those other units. Falconsmen are in the position we want, but they're not quite doing the damage, and now they're being hit by the general. The Stane over here need as an extra auxiliary unit to come and help. Now the general playing against pikemen is actually absolutely fine. These guys need to go down, blow the horn of destiny, and use what we can to try and cover our flanks. This occasion, we find it a little bit harder to chop them down. Now, our general on this occasion, by the way, he is now an awful lot stronger. Worth bearing in mind. He's still fast moving, not as tough as many others, but at least he's got more that he can do to hold out than before. It's finally started happening. The Bastani are at least breaking this flank over here. The pikes will keep doing their job for a little while, but I can see a bit of a pincer about to happen. The general, though, is going. Perfect. We can do it. That's it. A little bit tougher this time. A little bit tougher, but it looks like the work is just about being done. Blow the horn of destiny as we charge into them. That won't break them, but we can do a little bit to make sure we're mopping them up. Make sure that we're not going to bomb our own general. Hopefully all will be fine and we can start to mop up this army. Ooh, a little bit more tricky, but the general same tactic has largely done the job. In the end, it is classified as a heroic victory, albeit one that did come at a fair cost on this here occasion. But overall, I would say yeah, a good example of the potential perils, but the potential opportunities of this late game army against tough armies such as the Romans. One final battle pits us against the Britons because they're actually a surprisingly hard matchup for Thrace. It's probably not one that you think about too often because unless you do a long campaign, it'll be a while until you face them. Nonetheless, I do think that it is something that can potentially be very tricky, so you want to bear it in mind. The chariots in particular cause a lot of problems. So I brought along the Thracians as well, and we're in an exceptionally defensive formation here. Big long row of pikes, not as long as their army, of course. They are definitely trying to, yes, outrange us. Outflank us. But we want to be shooting down those chariots. We can't really do anything while these chariots are alive. So our plan basically is to try and hold position, shoot things down, and eventually we can then, when it's just infantry, go back to our normal tactic. But if you try it without taking these guys down, you're going to get flanked and the whole thing will fall apart like the proverbial Swiss cheese melting away. Eventually they do come into attack, which could potentially cause us a number of problems, but we'll just see how it all goes. Luckily chariots are going to run into the death, and yeah, their infantry is not going to hold against the pikes, especially with lots of men already taking damage. These guys are not going to hold forever here, but the javelin should be able to do the job. We'll get them to hold position at this point, actually. We'll be absolutely fine. Right, not ideal. You can see they've given up the second that encounter begun. But in general, so many victories that we can at least turn around a lot of the army, start to try to deal with it. Their assault has come just a little bit too late. I think we've done enough damage, whereby even though this flank is somewhat gone a bit insane, I think we'll be fine. In spite of most of the battle being completely won, the chariots are still alive, and as long as they're alive, the battle can't really end. And it is just an endless chase at this point. I mean, it's near enough victory, but it doesn't end. Just be wary. Particularly the British light chariots. Less issue with the Egyptians, I would say. They tend to have a much more wide variety of units, but the Britons, they generally bring a lot of these, and they can be very painful. Awful to face an auto-resolve, and potentially even more annoying like this. When victory is officially ours, it is classed as heroic, but it is pretty much down to bringing along Thracian archers, quite frankly. It's a painful thing. Maybe just leave the Britons on their island. Thank you for joining me today on this Battlefield Tactics Guide for Thrace. Do let me know which faction you would like to see down below, and make sure not to miss the related poll, which will make the final decision. Do include your own tips about this or any of the other factions, and it may well make its way into the next guide. There will of course be another live stream for Thrace, so make sure to join us for that on Tuesday. And finally, thanks to all my channel members and patrons for supporting the growth on the channel. If you want to support the channel yourself, then you can follow the links in the description. But for now though, I will leave you. I am Thomas, this is To Nerd Is To Human, and this has been a Battlefield Tactics Guide for Thrace in Rome Total War. Thank you friends, and bye bye.
Death and violence will come to you.
This is a beautiful, beautiful town, by the way, guys. Let's go and smash it up.
Dum tum tip tip tip. How did you die? What is happening to my men? Steve! He was the one man who tried!